pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. Let the record show that all members of the City Council are present this evening. A copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted in the meeting room and is accessible to members of the public at any time during the course of this meeting. First item on the agenda is the consent agenda. All items listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member so requests. First is item A, approve agenda as submitted. B, receive and place on file all notices pertaining to this meeting. C, receive and place on file all materials having any bearing on this meeting. D, approval of minutes of regular meeting on November 7th, 2022, as on file in the City Clerk's office. E, approval of Treasurer's report of claims in the amount of $605,098.96. F, approval of Boswell report of claims in the amount of $66,216.35. And G, resolution number 6964, executing the excess stop loss agreement with QBE Insurance Corporation and any and all other contracts, documents, exhibits, and memoranda necessary for the city's self-funded employee health plan. Is there any item that a council member wants removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, Mr. McLean.
I move that the items listed under the consent agenda be approved, accepted, and ratified as presented.
Second.
Moved by McLean, seconded by Morgan, that all items listed under the consent agenda be approved, accepted, and are ratified. Your vote, please. And that is approved 8-0. Next is a public hearing to receive comments from the public regarding the preparation of an integrated resource plan as required by the Western Area Power Administration under its Energy Planning and Management Program. Mr. Templemeyer?
Yeah, I've got John Kraske here, and I'm gonna make sure that. John, can you hear me? All right.
Very good.
Go ahead, John.
Okay, Mayor, members of the council, again, my name is John Kraske. I was asked to prepare an integrated resource plan for you all, and I'm just going to go through the presentation, and then we'll open it up to any public comments. I'll try to keep this as brief as I can because I know you have probably a lot of other important things on your agenda. So Western Area Power Administration, you buy your hydropower from them. They have the lowest cost resource that you purchase. It's probably about half the price of what you pay AEP for the energy you purchase from them. It's very important that you keep that allocation, that you follow all the rules associated with that. So one of the rules is having an allocation from WAPA is that you have to develop an integrated resource plan every 5 years. Now, when you're a customer of NPPD, you are included in their integrated resource plan. They did what's called a cooperative, and it covered the NPPD plus all of their customers that had allocations. So this is the first year you haven't been part of NPPD, and so you're subject to the rules on your own to prepare an integrated resource plan each year, and that's what this is for. What an integrated resource plan is, it's a planning process for new energy resources. You're supposed to consider the full range of alternatives, including new generation power purchases. One thing that isn't really quite traditional, it's what's called energy conservation. Rather than buying new resources, you just reduce your usage. So we looked at that, and then also looking at renewable energy resources. A lot of this work was done for the last 3, 4, 5 years as you began your transition from NPPD. So we're just basically memorializing the work that was already done and putting it in this document. There are 6 required elements in an IRP. You have to identify all practicable energy efficiency and energy supply resource options, prepare an action plan, minimize adverse environmental impacts associated with resource acquisitions, provide an opportunity for full public participation, which is what the purpose of this hearing is, do a load forecast, and then describe how you're going to measure whether you're meeting the objectives. So I basically did all those things as I prepared this plan. And I had done all these things for you previously when we entered into the contract with EP and looked at the wind and did all those things. Prepared a load forecast. Prepared a load forecast, compared to the load forecast to the resources that you have to estimate what your future needs are. Looked at potential DSM measures, including those that you've already implemented. And DSM is demand side measures. That's what I talked about earlier. Reducing customer usage to avoid having to buy resources. Integrate those together, look at your environmental impacts, and then have a hearing to have the public participation. So, there's some planning objectives that we talked about on slide 8. In the process I've gone through with you in the past, it's very clear that local control is very important to you. You want to have control over your resources, over what types of resources you buy, and your relationship with your customers with regard to DSM. There's been a focus. You want to continue to look at growth and development opportunities. I've worked with Tobias on a couple of those that haven't necessarily come through, but we're optimistic that opportunity will be there. You want to maintain rates that are competitive with neighboring utilities. I think that's obvious and very important. And encourage energy efficiency programs to the extent we can. Slide 9. So, as I said earlier, you've gone through a lot of these steps in the last 5 years. That's how you came up with the portfolio with AEP, with NextEra, with the Cottonwood project. And you're pretty much set through 2030. You have everything in place. And it's a least cost plan. It's lower cost than NPPD was. So you're in good shape. I will say toward the end of the 5-year plan, 2027 timeframe, you'll want to start looking at replacement resources for AEP, either extending that agreement or finding alternative resources, potentially even developing some local generation as well. That's really the only thing on the supply side that we need to worry about during this 5-year period. Now, we look at demand side measures. There's certain things we want to look at, and I went through all of these in an effort to try to find some measures that might work for you. And then once I identify those measures, we do an economic evaluation. Basically, what we're trying to do on these is figure out if there's something you can do that'll reduce energy usage that costs less than if you had to add capacity or energy. And that's called the total resource cost test. You basically compare A to B. If the demand side is cheaper, you can implement those measures. One thing I want to point out is there's not a lot that's very economical for you for a couple of reasons. First of all, you're not in PPD. You don't have 500,000 customers that you serve. So it's hard to find that economy of scale to develop some of these measures like Lincoln Electric and OPPD and NPPD have done. The second thing is your resource costs are pretty low. Your avoided cost is down around 4 cents a kilowatt hour. You've got capacity in place, so you're not going to save on demand charges. It's really just pretty difficult to make anything work. The one thing that makes sense potentially, and it's something you're already doing, is to offer rebates for high efficiency air conditioners. And there is some present value that you can achieve from that. But everything else pretty much, it just doesn't make economic sense for you to do. So, a couple other things that you've done in the past, you've implemented the LED streetlight replacement. That's a good program that will reduce your costs and reduce your energy usage, particularly, in wintertime off-peak periods. Pat does a pretty good job on the distribution system, identifying areas where you can make improvements. To the extent there are feeders that can be replaced or things of that nature that could maybe lower losses. You all look at that already with your design engineers, but I think those are some good low-cost measures that you can do as well. You do a good job of encouraging energy efficiency via your website, and I know you participate in some services with not the Nebraska Energy Office, the Nebraska Department of Energy and Environment. So again, I think when you look at this again in 5 years, there may be some measures that'll make sense, and you want to compare those to the potential other resources that you're going to be looking at. So environmental impacts, you have a really clean energy portfolio. About 40% of your energy comes from Cottonwood, which is a really good number. a lot of other states have requirements that around us that you purchase 10 or 20% of your energy from wind. In fact, you're at 40 positions you very well going forward, particularly if there's any legislation on carbon emissions or just the renewable portfolio standard. So feel really good about that. You eliminate 42,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions per year. So going again to the 2-year action plan, do what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. That's the key thing there. On page 17, the 5-year action plan, again, I think toward the end of this period, you'll have to consider some additional resources. So I think this is my final slide, is that this is a public process. We are required to go through to make sure that the public doesn't have any, find out what comments the public may have about the plan you put together, see if they have any input, and consider that as we prepare the final plan. If somebody comes in and says you should buy 100% of your energy from wind, that doesn't mean you have to do it. You just have to consider it and have, if it's a legitimate request and there's economic viability to it, great. But we do have to at least open this to public comment and give consideration on this as we go forward. We're going to continue to accept public input through December 7th. Written comments can be provided to Mr. Templemeyer. And then if there aren't any public comments, we'll consider those between December 7th and December 21st and prepare a final report for your approval at that time. So with that, I'm done with my presentation. No public comments or questions from anybody might have.
Any questions from the city council?
I've got one for Tobias, but I don't have anything for him.
Okay. Anyone from the public? Okay, John, I think you covered it well.
Okay.
Thanks,
All
John.
right. Well, thank you. And again, I'll get the final report prepared for December 21st, and we'll get that on the approval agenda. We just have to submit this by January 1st, and we'll be in good shape. So thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
So can we get this put on our website so that the public can view it? And
Yes, I believe it's already there, but I will confirm that with
Okay.
Amanda tomorrow.
that way, if there's any questions or comments, that we can get that information inputted.
Okay, so one of the problems that we have is, like he just said, our pool isn't very large. You know, we can't compete with MPPD, OPPD, because they have tens of thousands of customers. Can we do that? Can we expand ours? I mean, can we draw in communities that are close to us and put them under our umbrella? Could you have Wymore or Adams or anything? I mean, similar to what we do with the Mars? I mean, can
No, public power districts are drawn up by state statute, and if you want to move, there's a process to go through that. But Norris is located just around you, about a mile outside of town, roughly speaking.
Yeah.
And so you'd have to work with them in order to acquire their customers and move out those directions.
And they're not gonna work with us because
Right.
because we're the competition. So we basically set in an island.
Correct.
Okay.
It is possible to move those lines, but it's difficult to do.
All right. Well, I just thought that as I looked through this, and the only, I'd like to see us go more towards renewables, solar someplace, even if we, have an opportunity to put something up somewhere, like a well field or someplace. But the only other place I thought is to add customers, and I didn't know if that was obviously not impossible, but not really feasible.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Any other questions from the council? Mr. McLean?
I move that the public hearing be closed at 7:14 PM.
Second.
Moved by McLean, seconded by Billsbach, that the meeting be closed, or the public hearing be closed at 7:14 PM. Your vote, please. And that is approved 8-0. Next is resolution number 6965, entering into an agreement for purchase and sale of renewable energy certificates between the city and ACT Commodities Incorporated, as recommended by the Board of Public Works.
I move that resolution number 6965 be passed and adopted.
Second.
Moved by McLean, seconded by Morgan, that resolution 6965 be passed and adopted. Tobias?
In that last public hearing, we talked about Cottonwood Wind Farm. Well, as part of that Cottonwood Wind Farm, it generates renewable energy certificates for us. Those certificates we just simply put into a bank account, if you will, and then about every 6 months or so, we look to sell those. We generally have dealt with ACT Commodities, Inc. They provide us the best price in the past. And so once again, they reached out to us about purchasing the first 6 months of 2022. And that's what you have before you tonight is a contract to sell those renewable energy certificates to ACT.
How much will that be?
The price is confidential. They do not want that information out.
I asked that before.
So I read part of that in your report and that we're going to get to at the end of this, but I do have a little bit of a hard time trying to do the math on that to figure out whether we're making money or losing money on a month-to-month deal. Is there a way to simplify that, or do I just need to come in and sit down and have you explain it to me?
On Cottonwood?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a simpler way. I mean, if you want to come in, I'm happy to show you our information and show you what we're doing month to month.
As I read, it was in your report, and as I read through it, I went, okay, that's not right. And then I came back to it, and actually got a piece of paper out, and wrote it, I try to do the math, and
It's complicated.
It is complicated.
well, thanks. I appreciate that
isn't
it's
just-
complicated. It still doesn't mean I don't get it. So,
No,
I mean, because as I followed along with it for the first, I don't know, when we talked about it, because you and I had this conversation here, that we were actually making some money, and I'd figured out the math that we're ahead, and we're way ahead, but we haven't always been way ahead.
Correct.
So-
Some months are better than other months, and it really depends on the market where it's at. The market's been good for energy prices lately. When I say good, I mean they've been higher. If you're trying to sell, it's good.
Yeah.
But yes, if you stop in, we're happy to sit down and go through the information we have and show you what we're doing on Cottonwood.
Okay.
Changes every 5 minutes.
Well, yeah, and I've looked at that site, but maybe it's a bit above my pay grade, but it shouldn't be. I mean, I should understand it. I'm voting on it, I should understand it, so. There you go.
Any other questions?
No.
Anyone from the audience? All right, your vote, please. That is approved 8-0. Resolution 6965 has been passed and adopted. Next is Resolution Number 6966, entering into an agreement with HOA Solutions Incorporated for the installation of new equipment and pumps at the reservoirs located at 4th and Grant Street, as recommended by the Board of Public Works.
I move the resolution number 6966 be passed and adopted.
Second.
Moved by McLean, seconded by Billsbach, that Resolution 6966 be passed and adopted. Tobias?
This contract is to replace the pumps on the North Reservoir located at 4th and Grant Streets. Those pumps have been in place for 50-plus years, and what we're looking to do is replace them with some VFDs. We initially budgeted for this project last year, so we carried forward $90,000 in the budget for this project. This contract is for $128,520. We're looking to make up the difference. There's some other projects, capital projects that the water department will delay in order to move this project and make sure this one gets funded moving forward.
Questions?
Yeah, so as I read through this, and I understand you wanted to delay some projects, but the other projects, just like this, being more expensive. We have money in the water department cash reserves. We're not spending that?
It's an option, yes, but no. Initial idea is to delay them. Oftentimes, the water main projects come in under budget, and so the one, obviously, in your neighborhood, they're partly way done with that. They'll finish it up in the spring, but we see some cost savings coming there. If those continue to come in, we'll proceed with the other project, but rather than going ahead and booking that project, we'll wait to make sure these projects get done and come in on budget.
Okay, so you understand what my concern is that you're putting stuff off that is going to be more expensive then, and we have the money in the cash reserves now,
So just so you know, the project that we're looking at delaying at this point is a well rehab. That's something we have done every year. We have them come out, we have them look at a couple of different wells. If repairs need made, we make them. If they don't, then we don't spend that money. And so that's the project that we usually have them look at those wells sometime in the spring and summertime. That's the one that you may delay right now just to make sure this project gets done and gets completed, and then you know where some other projects come in first.
Yeah, I'm not voting against this. I think this is good projects. I also think that the ones that you're delaying, that they were put in there for a reason, and I thought we should be going forward with that as well. So I'll leave it alone.
Okay, thanks, Ted. Anybody else? Audience? And your vote, please. And that is approved 8-0. Resolution 6966 has been passed and adopted. Next is Resolution number 6967, executing the letter of agreement for professional services and any and all other documents necessary between the city and Olson's Incorporated to develop improvements to the city's grit handling system as recommended by the Board of Public Works.
I move that resolution number 6967 be passed and adopted.
Second.
Moved by McLean, seconded by Fralin, that Resolution 6967 be passed and adopted.
So this is additional improvements made to our wastewater treatment facility. As you guys have been on the board for some time, understand we've had a lot of process down there. We've been working through making improvements to that treatment plant. This is kind of the next step in that process. We hired Olson's last year to do a grit study, and during that, we looked at some different options out there to remove the grit from our system, and we selected a particular type of technology we'd like to use going forward. This contract here is to design the installation of that system into our process. And so this contract's for $260,470. This contract will go about a year. It'll go through the design phase and then into the bidding process. And then a year from now is when we look to install the actual grit system itself, or grit removal system. We project that total cost to be about $2.2 million with the engineering cost and everything involved with it.
Questions? You know what the grit is? Okay. Anyone from the audience? All right. And your vote, please. And that is approved 8-0. Resolution 6967 has been passed and adopted. Next is a resolution number 6968, executing an agreement for professional services between the city and JEO Consulting Group Incorporated to develop a spill prevention control and countermeasure plan for certain facilities throughout the city as recommended by the Board of Public Works.
I move the resolution number 6968 be passed and adopted.
Second.
Moved by McLean, seconded by Fralin, that resolution 6968 be passed and adopted. Tobias?
So the EPA requires us to have a spill prevention control and countermeasures, an SPCC plan. Anytime you have a bulk storage facility that's more than 1,250 gallons above ground, we have one at the service center, we have one at Mars, and we have one at WPC. We also have one at the landfill and at the compost site, but the landfill and compost site already have an SPCC in place. And so this contract is to retain JEO for $31,817 to prepare the plan at the service center, at Mars, and at WPC.
We've got a plan in place today.
We have a
It's
plan.
just revised as the plan.
Correct. The plan we have in place is older than 5 years, and so it needs to be updated. And
Okay. Questions, anyone? From the audience? And your vote, please. And that is approved 8-0. 6968 has been passed and adopted. Next is resolution number 6969, terminating the contract for conveyance of real estate between the city and William P. Barber, dated August 17th, 2020.
I move the resolution number 6969 be passed and adopted.
Second.
Moved by McLean, seconded by Fralin, that resolution 6969 be passed and adopted.
in 2020, we entered into a contract with William Barber for a mow-to-own contract for a vacated street or alleyway next to his property there. Mr. Barber has recently passed away. There are no provisions in that contract for it to be transferred to a next of kin or an heir or anything of that sort. And so that's why we brought it before you tonight to terminate the contract.
And it goes back into our inventory for the mow-to-own. Somebody else can make the application.
Correct.
Okay. Other questions, comments from the public? And your vote, please. And that is approved 8-0. Resolution 6969 has been passed and adopted. Next is resolution number 6970, entering into a lease between the city and CASA of Gage County for the purpose of using a portion of the city auditorium office space.
I move the resolution number 6970 be passed and adopted.
Second.
Moved by McLean, seconded by Claybaugh, that Resolution 6970 be passed and adopted.
So if you come in on the south doors of the city auditorium, if you go to the left, that would be the area that we have leased to the food pantry. This would be to the right would be the area that CASA is looking at renting from us tonight. It would consist of what used to be Chief Dakey's office. There's a small conference room or office attached to it, and there's also a little reception area there. That would be the area that we'd be looking to lease to CASA. Lease terms are for $1 a year, very similar to what we did with food pantry and others that have rented from us.
Comments? Questions?
Just a quick note that CASA of Gage County really only employs one employee currently. So, and all the people that they work with do not go in and out of that office usually. Those are usually done either in person or at the courthouse. So
All right.
Is that Amber's?
that is correct.
Any comments from the public? Amber, you want to say anything? Okay, all right. Thanks for being here. All right, and your vote, please. And that is approved 8-0. Resolution 6970 has been passed and adopted. Next is Resolution 6971, approving the construction contract award for project number 002 in the amount of $25,000 as part of the CDBG Occupied Owner Housing Rehab Project, number 29-HO-36035.
I move the resolution number 6971 be passed and adopted.
Second.
Moved by McLean, seconded by Fralin, that Resolution 6971 be passed and adopted.
So last year, the city applied for and received an owner-occupied rehab grant from the Department of Economic Development. We received approximately $400,000 to be put into low to moderate income houses here in the community to make upgrades to their properties. SEND is managing this grant for us, and so they're going out and checking to make sure that they qualify under all the income guidelines and asset guidelines that are out there. They inspect the property, they line up the bidding, they do all those things on these particular properties. Our job then is only to actually approve the award to that particular grant applicant. The unusual part about this grant application is the city is not allowed to know the name nor the address that will be receiving the grant until after you have approved it. The reason for that being is the feds want to make sure that we aren't selecting anybody either pro or con based upon who they are and approving them for those reasons. And so that's why it remains undisclosed until the grant application is actually awarded. In this particular case, you see the grant would be for $25,000 for roof replacement, soffit and fascia and gutters is what would be repaired. So I'm sure there are two questions out there. One, can I still apply for these funds? The answer is yes. If you are still interested in applying for these funds, you have to apply to SEND. You'd be happy to call the office. We'll get you the contact information for SEND. But yes, there's still applications available. And then as they'll work through and make sure that they qualify for the different, income amounts and assets, that kind of stuff that are out there, those limitations. Two, if I'm a contractor, how do I get to bid on these projects? You have to be certified by SEND in order to do that. So again, if you're a contractor and you're interested in being on that bidding list, contact SEND or contact the City of Beatrice. We'll be happy to put you in contact with SEND. They would love to have more bidders. Not only do they have this project in Beatrice, they have the same project in other communities around Beatrice. So if you're willing to travel a little bit, you can find some other jobs that are out there. But you need to be certified, and SEND will help you walk through that. One of the certifications is lead-based certification. So you have to do some testing on lead-based paint. It doesn't sound like it was a very difficult process to go through, but that's just one of the hoops out there in order to be certified.
Questions?
Is there a length of time they have to maintain ownership of the house after this is done?
5 years. So the loan is good for 5 years. There's a deed of trust that SEND will put on the property. The way they made it sound is like 1/60th gets forgiven every month, but it's for 5 years.
Gary?
Owner occupied means they have to live in that themselves, right?
Correct. Yes, no rentals. Those things don't qualify. Duplexes don't qualify. It has to be owner occupied, single family residence.
So if they sell it before the 5 years, do they have to repay the funds?
Yes, so a portion of that then has to be repaid. I think it gets prorated based upon how long you've been there. Obviously, they understand some of those things, life happens, and so yes, that is built into the contract that they signed with SEND.
I knew that. I was trying to make it clear to everybody.
Rich has a question.
Rich, sorry?
So is Gary.
Is this recoup on, or this remodel on his house, is it just 25,000, or is he going to put more into that house than this 25,000?
I don't think the participant's required to put any more into the house. There are only certain things that that the grant will cover, and SEND goes through that. They won't do, if you did a bathroom remodel, they make sure it's ADA compliant. They don't make sure it looks pretty. I mean, some of the pretty things fall upon the property owner. But in this particular one, I do not know that the participant is putting any additional money in.
I guess my problem with this thing is, I just remodeled my house here not too long ago, and I had to go down and borrow 25,000, 30,000 to remodel my house, and has the banks, has he not checked with the banks, or I mean,
Again, I don't know who the participant is.
I have no idea either.
But I will tell you that in order to qualify for this, your income has to be fairly low. I mean, and your assets have to be fairly low. My guess is these individuals who apply for this type of grant aren't ones that generally can go out and get financing through a bank. The other thing I'd remind everybody is these are federal dollars, they're not our dollars. It is a program that's out there that the feds have set up that we are taking.
Well, federal dollars are our dollars,
I understand.
but I don't like this.
Gary?
What do you said his income has to be what's fairly low?
Oh, give me a minute and I will find it.
I think mine's fairly low too, but
Mine will be here shortly. If I'd have known that, I'd have waited and let them pay it off.
There's always next time, Rich.
And yeah, there ain't gonna be a next time.
That's what I told my wife. It's twice the husband, half
I'm
the
trying to
wife.
figure out how it's a roof soffit and gutters that didn't get fixed in a hailstorm.
That was a question that was asked as we went through this with SEND, and they did checking and made sure that they have to, because one of the requirements is they have to have property owners, have to have homeowners insurance. The guidelines, I'm looking for them. We approved them here,
We're in town. Not
it
everybody.
might have been a year ago. Do you know a faster way to search on SEND or on Spark for them?
I don't.
I'm not getting paid by the hour. It's okay.
It's all right. Just give me a minute, I'll sort through them here.
My garlic bread will be the same when I get there. I thought it was like 30 grand or something.
What?
Not like 30 grand.
I don't think it's that much.
It was.
Yeah. I thought it was less than 20. If you figure
$27,600.
You know that number?
No, just throwing it out.
I did the,
It doesn't be close to that.
minimum wage,
I think it is in that neighborhood,
19,000.
but I can't tell you that for sure.
That's probably, then they have to get so many for kids.
Let's see, this is the grant itself.
You're probably right.
After the 15th.
Yep, that's true.
Looks like the grants are $547,000. 5 years. Nope, that does not lay out.
You know, at least there's not that little background music that.
Probably find some if you want to play some for a little while.
40 hours a week for the year.
You're not helping, Ted.
Make 21.
What?
If you got
It's like 20,000.
10.50 an hour times
Yeah.
20.80, you get 21,840. So I
Yeah,
bet
see, and I
it's,
thought it was 19,
could be.
last time I read this, and I'm not gonna, wouldn't bet on it, but I thought it was 19,800 and change. But
Yeah.
could have been something different. There's a lot of this.
You got the guy's number, I'll give him a call.
Probably.
Let's see.
Well, I found the agreement, but it does, it says there should be something attached, and this has a page, it goes up to page 23, and it doesn't say, it says eligible properties shall be single-family owner-occupied dwelling units located within the city of Beatrice. Oops, wrong one. Applicant's annual gross household income cannot exceed the established income guidelines set forth as attached. But in this document, there's nothing attached.
But there's nothing attached.
No, because the page that is attached to it.
Let's see. All right, here's the income levels. So if you are annual household income limits for eligibility, a family size of 1 is $42,150. A family of 4 is $57,350.
A lot more than I thought it was.
Repairs that are eligible, structural, mechanical, water heater, plumbing, winterization, that kind of stuff. Not eligible, detached garages or outbuildings, new driveways or sidewalks, window air conditioners, decks, landscaping, hot tubs. Those things are not eligible for this program. Each household can get up to $24,999.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Is that based on income only, or is there, are there assets also included?
When talking to SIN, they also looked at assets.
They also look at assets?
And yeah, and I don't know what that number is.
Any other questions? Anyone from the audience? All right, your vote, please. That is approved. 6-2 with Kerr and Barnard voting no. Resolution 6970 has been passed and adopted. I beg your pardon. Resolution 6971 has been passed and adopted. Next is resolution number 6972, executing the loan agreement, promissory note, personal guarantee, and deed of trust, and any and other all documents, contracts, or other memoranda necessary between the city and Lang Enterprises, LLC, in the amount of $26,000 for the repairs and partial demolition of the building located at 411 Court Street.
I move the resolution number 6972 be passed and adopted.
Second.
Moved by Freeland, second by Billsbach, that resolution 6972 be passed and adopted. Tobias?
So we are working through the demolition of 413 Court Street. As you guys recall, as part of that demolition, we had a change order come through for a partial demolition of 411 Court Street, demolish part of the back end of that particular building. That building's owned by David Lang, or Lang Enterprises, LLC. He has agreed to pay for the change order for the demolition of the portion of his building. And so what you see before you denied are loan agreements, promissory notes, deed of trust, all those necessary documents, $26,000. Repayment schedule is 3 years, 3% interest, and the deed of trust is on both of his buildings downtown and another property he owns here in the community.
Questions?
The plywood that he has up on the back of it, or the USB, whatever that is that it? Is that permanent? Is that what he's gonna do to seal that up? Or is there more to it than that?
I would like to say there's more to it, but I will double check. I don't know the answer for sure.
Because if that's it, we're gonna be taking it down too.
I'll check on it for you.
Thanks.
Any other questions from the audience? And your vote, please. That is approved 8-0, resolution 69.
I need Kerr. You're off, Kerr.
Now it's approved 8-0. Resolution 6972 has been passed and
They've got
adopted.
stuck between yes and no.
We have no ordinance this evening. Next is a public forum. Purpose of the public forum is for the presentation of an item by the general public to the city council for consideration at a later date. No discussion or action will be taken by the city council at this time. Is there anyone here for the public forum? Seeing none, we'll go into discussions and reports. And first up is Main Street Court Order Report. Michael? Good evening, Michael.
Thank you, Mayor.
Michael's just has handouts.
Thanks, sir.
Gave my extras to,
Yeah, but none of it's edible.
guys sitting in the audience.
Yeah, I got it.
Hopefully there's enough
Yep,
room on one sheet.
good, yep. I don't know, just depends on how hungry you are. It could be edible.
Pizza or something.
All right, Mike.
Thank you. I know you all have it in your digital packets, but in the past, you guys said you liked having a paper copy as well. So this report is on the fourth quarter of your fiscal year that just wrapped up, so July through September, but really more kind of a summary of the fiscal year itself. Seemed that was probably appropriate as we wrapped up the fiscal year. With the fourth quarter there being July through September, one of the big focus areas was to continue our efforts on the property development aspects of things, but definitely also try to make up for some of the lost ground with our business visits, work with, I already mentioned the property issues, our marketing campaign, and those types of things. In this quarter, it was also really busy as far as trying to work with the city on some of the planning efforts that are out there. You guys might remember that in the last quarter, that's when we wrapped up the work with UNL on the new downtown revitalization plan. At the same time, we've started work that with the city's partner and I think the school's partner with K-State. And so that process is now underway, working with the students from K-State, and their big, heavy visits to Beatrice occurred during this time. So really trying to work through a lot of that. So a lot of planning activities, which have been both always are fun to go through, but also just very time consuming and whatnot. So there is that. One of the other big things of this last quarter was our creative district. We worked a lot with the Nebraska Arts Council, hosted them into Beatrice to go over their site visit and that creative arts district process. I'll talk more about that here in a little bit. We restarted some of our efforts on the Real Estate Investment Cooperative, an initiative that has been talked about for a long time here in Beatrice and is just part of our strategy to try to create some sustainability in our property investments. Mentioned the start of the marketing campaign. We have hired that firm and are moving forward with that process. But as far as into the key areas of things, you guys had mentioned your owner-occupied housing program. A similar program to that was the Downtown Revitalization Grant. We are about a year into that process. I think it's probably fair to say that things have maybe moved a little slower than would have liked, but a lot of those projects are getting across the approval line, getting themselves started, and have the next year's construction season to try to get completed. Through that process and just through working with our other property owners, we have made 64 in-person visits with our property owners and continue to make that a huge focus area. We've been trying to help with the transition of several properties. We've been successful in seeing new investments with folks like, Aaron Schoen here in the audience, but then others, some properties on North 6th Street. You guys have been successful in taking on some of the city-owned properties with 323 Court Street, the JCPenney's building, a variety of different properties that have recently changed ownership. Clayball Pharmacy recently acquired the one next to them. And so it's been really nice to see that there's been some progress in moving some properties, hopefully into the hands of some folks that will be continuing to make great strides and investments into this community. So that has been a thing that has continued over the fourth quarter, but certainly over the entire fiscal year, was really made a focal point and continues to be so. And there's been a lot of success. And since Terry's here in the audience, really want to thank him because he's been a big part of those efforts as well. Obviously, one of the ones that's looming over top of us is the Kensington in more ways than one. It's one of the biggest buildings in the community. We continue to work on that process. It's obviously moving in a different direction than maybe we would have thought back in February or April, but we continue to be in contact with a few of the developers that have expressed some interest there. Purchase price has obviously been a major barrier, as well as some of the advocacy issues on the state side of things, as one of the major tax credit programs has essentially run out of time and was not renewed by the state legislature here this last session. There are plans to do that here starting in January, but is creating some uncertainty on that project with the Kensington. So we continue to work through that. It's actually one of the reasons why this report didn't come to you guys last month when it was supposed to, is because we were meeting with state senators and also Senator Deb Fisher to discuss that. And so property issues have certainly been something that we have far exceeded what we had anticipated on doing with you guys. I think almost threefold. And luckily we have seen some success in there. There's no doubt that we didn't anticipate that we were going to solve all the property issues in downtown Beatrice in just a few months, but it is nice to see that there has been progress made, and really appreciate all the support that you guys have been on some of those projects. As we talk about small business and working with some of our existing businesses, and also working with those that would be looking to start a business in Beatrice, we did conduct 46 in-person sit-down visits. That would be a little more in-depth. We had about 150 plus other conversations. That was a little bit behind what we had set as our goal with you guys. And there's multiple different reasons that we can talk about if you guys so choose. We did take in 30 different folks inquired about starting a business. Out of that, we had 17 actual in-person visits, which has been pretty good. Although I will say that this last fiscal year has actually been one of our slowest in the amount of people that have started a business in relation to net gains and net losses downtown. We're at an even net zero. It's the first time that we've been that low. We've always had net gains over the last 5 or 6 years. Especially over the last quarter, we've really seen a real slowdown, and especially the last 2-3 months, of people that are wanting to stick their neck out. And so obviously one of the big things is to certainly respect those that are currently making those investments, but those that are looking at being your new crop of entrepreneurs and whatnot, there's definitely some uncertainty in the market, and we can see that bearing itself out here over the last few months in that area.
Michael, is there any stumbling blocks that you have come across that from your visits with these folks, that you get to a certain point and then there is a roadblock? What is it? Capital? Is it
a large amount of it is capital. A lot of, especially coming out of the pandemic, a lot of people, it gave them a chance to start thinking about the idea of, hey, maybe I want to be in business for myself. And a lot of people started thinking about that, really starting to have some of those conversations, maybe with their spouse, or maybe they got a little bit of extra money that came in from some of those government programs, and they were thinking, man, maybe this is my time to make a break from my job. But then as they started crunching the numbers, looking at equipment, looking at renovation cost, rental cost, whatever that is, capital almost always comes up. There's several folks that I'm working with right now. They're like, well, as soon as my student loans are paid off, then I'm probably going to start a business or this or that. That's constantly part of the conversation. Trying to connect them with potential lenders. Main Street, we also have a revolving loan program. But folks want to be pretty self-sufficient. One of the big things that we see here in Nebraska is that a lot of people want to be able to make this really through their own means. They don't like to take advantage of a lot of these extra programs. Sometimes it's like, hey, we might be able to pull this across the finish line. But as we go through business coaching with folks, there are some where flat out, when we do their cash flow analysis with them, they can't replace the income that they're currently making. And when they've got a family at home or they've got to have insurance and those types of things, there are times where we do not suggest to people that they look at starting a business if we think it'll be a detriment to them and that they may not succeed. We'd much rather, we want to build up successful businesses, not people that are just here for 6 months and then aren't able to make it work. So that's definitely, finances is probably the leading factor. And so definitely trying to continue working with those folks. As we had some of the staff changeovers within our own office, we did, with bringing Morgan onto our staff here this last year, we did conduct 20 of our marketing visits. We had planned on doing quite a few more. Some of that came down to our own timing, but then also with conversations with some members of the city council, it became very apparent that the way that we were conducting some of our meetings and the way that we were trying to deliver some of the metrics off of that maybe wasn't necessarily what each side was. We maybe had a little bit of a misunderstanding there. So we do need to reevaluate that before we start to move forward with more of those to make sure that we are actually hitting the right targets there. So hopefully that kind of gives you a little bit of some of those things with the year. Obviously, we had a lot of different ground that we covered. Again, trying to continue working with those entrepreneurs. We're certainly going to try to work through the challenges of this market, working with our properties. We've had some successes. We certainly need to try to get ahead of that 8 ball, as you guys were just talking about. One of the big goals is never to have another experience like the Barber Building. And that comes down to trying to spur investment in the community, but it also comes down to, at times when needed, having the right codes in place to enforce minimum maintenance standards. We have a lot of property owners that are doing the right thing, that are investing. And the last thing we want is someone's property rights that's doing good things to be threatened by someone who's maybe being negligent or allowing dilapidation to occur at their building. And we'll continue working through some of our planning aspects. Again, the marketing aspects are really moving forward strongly with us. The advocacy side of things, trying to bring back some of the tools that'll help us tackle, especially the big projects like the Kensington, are going to be key. Both on the federal and state level, we have some good opportunities, but trying to have those conversations and build some of those coalitions so that way we can regain those tools and hopefully get a building like the Kensington renovated and into someone's hands sooner rather than later, and many others. So there's a lot of ground to cover. I could definitely keep going, but you guys have this report here in front of you. What questions might you all have?
I just had a question, Michael. The UNL did their study on the downtown, and K-State's done one. As a group, are you planning on merging them together for kind of a comprehensive plan of the two, or?
That's definitely something that probably needs to be a conversation amongst you guys and us. They are definitely distinct and different. The UNL study was fairly broad overview of downtown itself. I think it had 16 recommendation areas, somewhere right around there. I might be off a number or two. K-State is being very site-specific. They are studying the 4 elementary sites, the preschool site, the middle school site, and then kind of that corridor if the highway was to move, and Dempster's. And so there's certainly some synergy within the 2 plans, but there's also a lot that's very separate from each other, especially that part with all the school sites was not a focus area of the UNL study. But I do think that conversation of how do we take these 2 plans, what do we feel is viable, certainly in the short term, maybe what are some of those long-term things is definitely a point of conversation. Otherwise, these plan efforts may sit there. Now, while they have been some really forward-thinking plans, because they are being developed by students, the idea of how to necessarily land these isn't always.
Some of them are never.
Some of them are a little bit pie in the sky, and I think we have to understand that. But it doesn't mean that we can't take some of these ideas and say, hey, there's elements here that are very creative, and certainly as we want to have this be a community that's attractive for future generations, this is one of the best ways to get a pulse of that is some of those folks that you're wanting to keep here or attract here are the folks that are part of these planning studies. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Mr. Morgan.
Michael, do you have a chance to work with the Nebraska office, district office of the Small Business Administration?
A little bit. We definitely talked with them a lot during the pandemic. There's been some talk amongst ourselves, Engage, and the chamber to work with them a little bit more as far as, especially some of the training sessions. We originally had planned to work a lot with Center for Rural Affairs and their rural entrepreneurial project called REAP. But the challenge was SBA especially, and even a little bit of the Nebraska Business Development Center were both really overwhelmed by all the programs that came out from the pandemic. That even when we've tried to reach out to them over the last couple of years, they've been very helpful in those areas that they've been largely tasked with, but Nebraska's staff, the SBA, it's for our area, I think is like 2 or 3 people, and they just seemed like they were really overwhelmed the last couple times I've tried to work with them.
May be able to help you out there.
Yeah.
The district manager reached out to me and going to have lunch with me in
Okay.
January. So
Very good. Yeah. Would love to certainly create a stronger relationship there, because they do have a wealth of information and wealth of programs. We're trying to work on a system to connect some of the SBA lending with some local banks as well to expand our SBA guaranteed loan program as well.
And this gentleman has done a lot with incubator businesses and also with entrepreneurship. So
Yeah.
I will certainly put in a good word for
Yeah,
him.
would love to have that conversation.
Well, and to piggyback on Bob's comments, there are some lenders in Beatrice that are SBA certified.
There are.
Because of the number of loans that they generate, and they
Yes.
can do express loans. Those express loans don't have to go through the Nebraska office.
No.
They usually go through a Sacramento office
A
or
lot of them
something
don't.
like that.
And then there's new
Turnaround time is 24 to 48 hours.
Yes, and it is, they are great tools for both parties. They've also got newer, well, not newer, but programs that aren't being utilized here in Beatrice, like the 504 program and some others that can bring an even larger amount of equity investment, can unlock higher potential for capital. So answering that problem that we were talking about before is certainly some things we need to explore.
Mr. Kerr?
I don't know if you can answer this or not, Michael, maybe you can. It seems like here a month or so ago that we voted to have an engineer come in and look at the Kensington. Did we do that?
Correct.
What was the findings on that?
That assessment occurred last week, and we do not have the written report back yet.
But they have been in and
Correct.
checked it out.
The week of the 10th?
Yes.
Yeah, and we're trying to maintain, there's a couple developers that pending what's found in that review and a few other things, we're just trying to keep some interest there.
Sure.
You know, there's a good chance that the city may have to be involved to some degree, but we're hoping that we can keep enough interest by some developers where it's relatively, really short term.
Well, if we get a good review from the engineer, I would think that would help out quite a bit.
You know, because any private developer is probably going to come in and you're probably looking at an investment of over 5 million, maybe even closer to, you know, neighborhood of 10 to really bring that building up to speed and fully inhabited again.
I don't want to tear that one down.
No, certainly not.
Any other questions, gentlemen? Anyone from the audience? All right, Michael, good report. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Michael.
everything you do.
Appreciate all your time, and definitely, if you haven't already seen it, check out your little holiday gift guide that recently came, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
You too.
Thanks, Michael.
All right, next on the agenda is the City Administrator's Monthly Report. Tobias, got the spotlight.
Sure. First, I want to start off, we talked about the Integrated Resource Plan. It is available on our website already. So if you are interested and would like to read that at home, you're more than welcome to pull that up, search for IRP, and it came up right away. So that is out there. I just want to remind people, the highway rerouting, again, we are working on that. You'll see those meetings come out after the holiday season. We have a contract with Olson's already. We did not feel like having public meetings during the holiday season was going to be too workable, and so that will work to pick up after the holiday season. We'll make sure we keep those advertised. It'll be a very similar process to the Lincoln Street project on that one. SRF projects, remember the water department got a loan from the state to do their SRF projects, and we got about $7,550,000 is what we got for a loan. We have all the contracts, or all those projects under contract at this time. They're about $100,000 over budget, so about $7,650,000. We'll look to use some of the cash reserves in the water department to make sure those projects get completed as those move forward. They're starting to ramp up. You'll start seeing work on those this year yet, this calendar year yet, and a lot of work in this next upcoming summertime. And then May Street Apartments, if you have not been by, they are down and they are removed and they are gone. So
Just some scrap metal left.
just a little bit of scrap metal left, but we will see what tomorrow brings on that particular project. But as of today, it's done and gone, and we'll work to see what we can do to redevelop it.
Any questions of Tobias?
Tobias, I asked him the question about the wind thing. I'll set something up with you, come in. The water project, the tributary project that
Yes.
kind of Hannibal, I know it's still in your report. Have we had any movement on that?
No, we submitted that grant here probably a month ago, and we are still waiting to hear back from the state of whether or not they're going to fund it. We applied for a grant for there and one for Belvedere area as well.
Okay. So, and we'll find out when?
When the state gets around to telling us.
Okay.
If they called us and asked us to apply, we had pre-applied, then they called us and told us to apply, and so I would have thought it'd been a fairly quick turnaround, but here we are a month later and we haven't heard anything yet.
I
so.
thought it was 2 months.
Could be.
Maybe I misread it, so.
And they also gave us forms that they provided us forms to use, then they resubmitted things back on different forms and want us to have the same information on a different form, and that took about 4 weeks to get together after we submitted.
Yeah, it's like turning a battleship, I get it.
Any other questions of Tobias? All right, with that, next regular city council meeting is going to be December 5th in these chambers. There will not be a work session on Monday, the 28th. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. And Mr. McLean?
I move the meeting be adjourned at 8:02 PM.
Second.
Moved by McLean, seconded by Billsbach, that the meeting be adjourned at 8:02 PM. Your vote, please. That is approved 8-0. Thank you.